Thinking back to 2018, which it really kind of speaks to the fact that you never know what you're going to get when it comes to any kind of race, and especially a race like a marathon where you're outdoors in the elements for an extended period of time as it is, especially if you're on it's all relative, but if you're on the somewhat slower side like I am, you're somewhere 4 or 5 plus hours outdoors. And in 2018, not only was it cold, but also it rained on us the entire time. And it was just, I mean, it was really about as miserable, unfortunately, as you can get when it comes to the weather experience. And here I am for the first time ever running the Boston Marathon, the fabled historic, and you're out on the course. And one of the things you always hear about Boston is that the crowd support is second to none. It's just incredible. And when the conditions were like that, it was amazing how many people were still out there, but it was not quite the experience that I had sort of anticipated going into it. But you just never know. You have to be ready for anything. And we're lucky that we train through the winter months here in Boston, so it's cold and you're out there with many layers on and gloves and mittens on top of that, and you're one thing that's happened to me before is I usually run for longer training runs. I'll wear a hydration pack, and it's got a couple of bottles that are up against me, but the liquid in the bottles can freeze when you're doing these runs, and suddenly you can't get at the water or the hydration that you really need. And it's just, so you have to anticipate that. And that particular, the 2018 marathon was just, I remember my hands being so cold and numb that when my shoelaces came untied, I couldn't tie them. I had to do full stop. I'm trying to make my fingers work, and it just wasn't working for me. And I almost had to ask somebody on the side of the road to help me. And finally, I was able to do it. But it's just, because you can't run with the laces undone, and it was that cold. And and it motivates you. It certainly gets you to want to get this thing done with when it's when you're out there, and the conditions are like that. And I remember how happy I was when I finally got across the finish line. And then I'm across the finish line and I'm celebrating, and yes, I did it. And then it's like, okay, now where do I go and how do I warm up? And because then suddenly as soon as your body stops moving, the effect of the environment and how cold and wet I was really kind of sunk in. And finally I was able to get inside a building and warm up until I could connect with my family that was in the area trying to find me and get me to warmth. So it was just it was an ordeal. And I don't want to take anything away from what an amazing experience it was. And despite the elements, how many people were still out there rooting us on. And but it just really shows you how you have to be ready for anything. And that, so last year when I made the decision to run for Hoops and Homework, for the first time through Team Framingham, what drew me to it initially was the way that it serves some of the kids who need the extra help the most in Framingham, where I've lived now since 2008, and where my wife grew up. And knowing the neighborhoods that Hoops and Homework serves, and just I've got a couple kids, and they're in the schools here. One's at Barberry Elementary, and one's at Walsh Middle School. And I want to be able to give all the kids of Framingham the same kind of experiences that I'm fortunate enough to be able to give my own kids. And that was one of the things that struck me through what Hoops and Homework does, that it's not just athletic enrichment, it's not just academic, it's also the arts and music. And it's just, there's so many different ways that that the kids who really need a little something extra are able to to get these kind of experiences, and I just love it. It drew me immediately to the mission of the organization. And then when I went through the experience of getting to know Herb and the other members of the team, and also some of the volunteers that serve the kids through this program, it's just like the passion that everybody has for what you do and for the kids, and just the extent of the services, and that the always looking to add more and to be able to serve another neighborhood if possible. And I that just I because I went into it not really knowing and not knowing the people involved, and now that I do, it's like it was an absolute no-brainer to do this again, and just to be part of it in some small way. So I'm just so excited to be able to help Hoops and Homework benefit from this and continue to serve these kids that live here in Framingham. So it's at least as much mental as physical to run a distance like this, and I've done races that are even a bit longer than a marathon length, and I've also done I do obstacle course racing through Spartan, and some of those are not only long, but they test. It's not just the lower body of the legs, and there is a lot of running, but it's also kind of the upper body that you have to put into it. And there are so many times, even on regular training runs, where I just like if I completely listened to what my mind was like telling me and feeding back to me, I'd say, I just can't, like, I have to stop. This is too hard. And what I find with running is if I just slow down a little bit, and actually, here's a specific example. When I ran Boston last year, somewhere in the Heartbreak Hill region or just after it, I cramped up almost as badly as I ever have. Both legs, the quads. I couldn't. I had to completely stop running and start walking because they were locked up so much, and it was just the pain was excruciating. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not like it hurts. I want to stop, but I'm not stopping. If I have to walk the rest of the way to get across the finish line for the last 5 or 6 miles, I'm just gonna walk. And so I walked to the next station where they had water and Gatorade, and I thought, okay, when you cramp, sometimes it's like a salt deficit or something like that. So I drank a bunch of Gatorade and kept walking, and suddenly, okay, it's starting to ease up a little bit. Started at a light jog, and then I was able to get back into my groove again, and the cramp went away. But it was so tempting to just say, oh, like I can't do it. And I've had that happen so many times on these longer distances where like you have to convince yourself that despite how tired your legs are and how many things are hurting, and if maybe blisters, and the blisters are forming, and it's going to be rough when you're done and the next day, and it's just, but you got to will yourself to continue and to get across the finish line. And it's one thing if you were truly injured, okay, you've got to listen to your body, but so many times you're not injured, it's just that mental battle, and you have to overcome the pain and just kind of will yourself to the end. Back when I was younger in high school, and they kind of forced us to run, and and it was even we were even I think we got like a final exam grade on our performance to run a mile and a half or something around the track at school. And I didn't know how to run. I would always kind of go out too fast because you'd have all the cross country and track kids running, and they were so good at it. And so I'd burn myself out, and I would just be miserable, and I'd feel nauseated. And I was like, why would anybody possibly do this? And for years after that, I just thought to myself, I'm not a runner. I'm not interested in this. And my friends, I think it was 2014 or 15, my friends were starting to do it just as a hobby, and I was like, nah, this isn't for me. I don't want to run. And finally they convinced me, and I kind of did it. And one thing that I learned is that you don't need to go out there and try to beat records or be a speed demon. That if you go out and you go at your own pace, it can actually be kind of enjoyable. and so I did it. And I remember the first time I ever ran in an actual race, it was a 5K. And, I finished in, certainly for me, I was happy just to finish it. And I remember at the same event, there were also people doing a 10K, so twice the distance. And when I finished, I just thought to myself, how could anybody possibly do more than 5K? I just can't believe it. This is mind-boggling. And little did I know that suddenly one day, a few years later, I'd be running a marathon. And I think it tells you that all the things that there's so many mental limitations that we put on myself that I know I put on myself that just said, oh, you could never do this, Steve. Like there's just no way. It's too hard. It's not for you. It's for somebody else. And I remember I would keep every other week, I would add a half mile or a mile to the total I had ever done. And then one day I worked myself up to, okay, I'm going to sign up for a half marathon. I'm going to try this. And I did it with some friends because that was motivating and was able to do it and said, okay, I did that. Like I never thought I could do this. And then, we know where I ended up and that I've been able to do marathon distance and beyond. And it's just like the confidence boost that like uh, kind of has created for me and so many other people I know that just went out thinking I could never do this and other people can. And then you really can surprise yourself by what you're capable of and what the body is capable of. And it really has made me feel like there's nothing I can't do if I just put my mind to it. And if I don't look at it and say, okay, the most I've ever done is a 5K and now I have to do a marathon. It's like, okay, maybe, 2 years down the road, that was the plan, but how do you get there one day at a time? And coming up with these small incremental goals I've learned, and I apply that in so many other parts of my life now. When there's a big goal for work or for my family, my kids, it's like, wait, you can dream big, and that doesn't mean you have to know exactly how you're going to get there. But if you can make these small differences every day or every week, ultimately you can get to that big picture goal. And that's something it's a life lesson that I've learned through this process. Yes, it's supporting me, and I'm doing something challenging for a reason, but ultimately it's like it's supporting kids that need the support so much, just to kind of have a more level playing field and to have some of the opportunities that other kids get. And that's the way I think of it more than, and I used to have a hard time asking anybody to donate money on my behalf to something, and I've kind of learned like it's easier because I focus on like what it's actually going to. And it, like I'm just doing something uh, in order to support an amazing organization and ultimately the kids that the organization is dedicated to. Um and I think that's where the support is going. And if people are uh um you know if what I'm doing provides an inspiration for them to give anything that they're able to, like that's amazing. And that's all I can ask is, people have a lot of options in terms of what they can support. And if by doing something challenging, like it inspires them to say, hey, let me do this like with Steve so that we can make a difference in these kids' lives. Uh, that's what it's all about. Going to third time doing Boston. I've had the opportunity. I did Chicago. I've done Vermont City a couple times. I did the Bay State and Lowell. So I've done like local ones, and then I've run in a few of what they would call ultra marathons, which technically is anything above 26.2, but they tend to be 50K, or I've actually done a 50 miler two times, and you're really out there all day long. I think it's like 11, 12 hours of just kind of constant movement. So like between all of these, it's probably around 15 events of this kind of distance. And I've learned that I don't really like to run fast and to do like those shorter distances where your lungs are burning. I like the endurance style events, and there's just something about the people that do it and the community around it is just everybody's so supportive of each other, and it's really inspiring what some of the stories that you hear from people. So it's really become one of my passions is doing these, and yeah, I really like it. Like I said, way back when I ran my first 5K, 3 miles, it was like people do more than that, and then somehow I just worked my way up to. And there's people that do 100-mile races and they run all night long. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm like, maybe I'll try that one year. And it's and that's a whole other thing because you're running through the night and yeah, but we'll see. Never say never. You hit upon a lot of good things, and hopefully, some of what I've shared will, you know, inspire people to want to do this. And